See, I'm looking to intercalate male and female. And here. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Yolanda Martinez. I'm part of the ITU team for GovStack. Very proud and very grateful for the opportunity to also join this initiative. As a former CIO for Mexico, I truly found very interesting the work that we do to enable digital teams in delivering in their capacity to design citizen-centric digital services. And one of the biggest challenges that we do have in public sector is procurement. So I'm very happy to have the opportunity to share the panel today with people that I had met before, and I really enjoyed discussing about these topics, and now we can do it in the open and engage a very diverse audience. So thank you to Lee Patterson, board member of Estonia Association of Information Technology and Telecommunications, to be here. Dear Tor, thank you as well. He is section leader, Information Management Directory of Digitalization in Norway. And Anir, a veteran, truly passionate, policy advisor at the government of Bangladesh through UNDP. And during this second block, we're going to discuss about green ICT procurement practices, partnerships, and how relevant these topics are in enabling digitization of government services. So I would like to start this conversation with Tulin. And being in Estonia, which is a leading country in digitization, this cannot happen if public sector and private sector work together. And I think if we go back to the 90s, when Estonia became an independent state, we could identify that Estonia needs to be built on technologies that were not only the latest, but that could allow to be always evolving. So I think it will be very interesting for us if you can elaborate on how Estonia's strategic approach to sustainable ICT procurement during these early years of independence has played a pivotal role in advancing the growth of a very dynamic digital ecosystem.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and also I think that not present only Estonia, but also present the private sector's view on procurements on this stage. But back to your question, then, when we think what happened in the 90s in Estonia, it's also, I think, important to understand a bit our cultural context. And Estonians are actually very simple people. We are very straightforward, so sorry if I'm also very straightforward on this stage. And we have a strong urge for the common sense to be involved in things that we do. So we want to understand that if we do something, what will happen next? And what happened in 90s, and what we are very proud of what happened, is that there was strong cooperation between different sectors. Public sector trusted and listened to the engineers to tell them what's possible, how could we do it, what would be the solution that fits our needs. And if we think that what these needs were in the 90s, just right after we had gained independence, then it is we need flexibility. We need flexibility, we need to build things on our own because we need that flexibility. You never have that level of flexibility with any off-the-shelf product. And maybe these are a few things that we see that maybe we are trending away from, and that we see that are important in every procurement, and we should just find those core things again. And this, if I just mention two things for the beginning, then one of them is quality, that it is quality that matters in any procurement. It can't be the price or the price only or price mainly. It has to be quality mainly. And the other part is really the partnership part. It can't be that one side is telling the other what they ought to do or what's best or how things should work or how their teamwork should be arranged. It is a partnership that is long-term, where both parties can have ownership of what is going to be delivered.
Thank you. And retaking of this type of partnership approach, I would like to now turn to Tor. And as we were preparing for the panel, a few thoughts were shared. And one that really got my attention is about how important it is for governments to design services based on user needs, on user journeys, on live events, and how we translate that into the procurement process, when usually procurement process tend to be solution-driven, not necessarily user journey-driven. So on that note, how can government approach ICT procurement policies to enable live events-based services?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for having this opportunity to talk to you about these issues. And I'm very happy to be in Estonia. It's definitely a journey that you have been through that I really like to learn more about because it's amazing. I'm a data sharing enthusiast, so I'll try to come back to my enthusiasm during these minutes that we have here. But anyway, we are building and rebuilding our plane mid-flight. That's what we are doing all the time. And the plane is getting better and better. When we are rebuilding it, it's going faster and faster as well. And the needs are also developing, or the expectation of the services that we are delivering are getting increasingly harder and harder to solve within the sector. And outside the sector, we need also to collaborate with private sector, as you mentioned as well. So, being in this plane that we are flying, we need to make sure that we can change the engine without stopping the plane. And if we change the engine and it fails, we really must make sure that it fails very fast. So, coming to my 3 stakes here, we need to, in the procurement process, ensure that we have the agility to change as we go, because things are going faster and faster, and the expectation from the public is increasingly more and more difficult to solve within the sector, as I said. We need to make sure that the requirements that we put in are requirements for the future, that we build in what standards we are to follow, so we can change this engine without using from one type of supplier to another. This plane is still going to fly. And the third stake is, let's say that it's something that I would like to emphasize, to urge for, and is to use the leeway in the legislation. Don't look for arguments for not doing. Look for arguments for doing, because there is definitely leeway in the legislation for using GovStack or DPI, DPG components. There is leeway in the legislation to buy or to take use of open source software and procure competence. But the requirement that we put in must support the future.
Agree, and building on that, over the past 2 years, GovStack has put together 11 technical specifications that are technology neutral, standard-based, with their corresponding API definitions, together with an ICT procurement guideline that is really looking forward to provide the necessary flexibility, the necessary modular architecture to be able to change pieces in the airplane without the citizens feeling any interruption in integrated digital service experience. And I really invite everyone here in exploring progress so far, because that's at the heart of what we do, enabling digital services to use the technical specifications to develop their own stack, complement their current stack, or procure in a faster way. And Anir, you have been in Bangladesh innovation ecosystem for years now. How did you strike the balance between this speed of innovation, but also good ICT procurement practices?
Yolanda, thank you. I have a bit of a cold, so I hope I'm audible. My first time in Estonia. We've been learning from Estonia, studying Estonia for over a decade now. In fact, one of our original programs for A2I was actually designed by an Estonian who spent a few weeks in Bangladesh in 2011, I remember now. So I'm very excited to be here. But you put me in probably the most difficult panel of the day. Procurement, the most difficult thing I have to deal with on a daily basis. But to answer your question, I'll just say three things. One is how we have introduced e-procurement. In 2017, about 2% of our public procurement went through e-procurement. In 2022, it was 80%. So there was a remarkable jump, and COVID really accelerated that for sure. And just to give you some statistics, we saved about $1.4 billion, about 1 billion pages of paper, about 500 million kilometers of travel, and 153,000 tons of carbon emission. So that's from a environmental aspect. But also, the second point is that we changed the public procurement policy to enable more innovative companies to apply for e-government projects. Because the practices that we had before, the requirements were quite stringent, and only the larger companies would actually be able to bid. Now, what we have done is we've allowed the smaller companies, the SMEs, the startups to bid also, often forming consortiums and joint ventures, because they are much more agile. And to your point, that we have to be able to change not the fuel only, but the engine in mid-flight. And that's what we're trying to do with this agile procurement policies. And the last point, the third point is the issue of DPI, the digital public infrastructure and DPGs. To give you an example, in 2009 and 10, when we just started the journey, we asked about 400 agencies at that time what they would want to do as part of their digital next step. And most of them were not digital. So they said that about 300 of them said they would build a website because they didn't have one. So what we did was we actually built a DPI for 50,000 offices of the government, not just those 300. So now we have a national portal, which is 52,000 offices under one umbrella. And if we did that per agency, we'd have spent probably 100 times more in terms of time and money and maintenance. I'll give you another example of a DPI called MyGov, which is across the entire government, all ministries. About 1,700 services are within that one app. And it's not just the technology itself, the services behind the app have also been simplified, what we call in a process called service process simplification. So by simplifying, we actually reduce steps. And that also gives us innovation and also reduces environmental impact. So that's how we balance. So I think we see this innovation and environmental impact through the same lens.
Thank you for sharing that. And recapping on the increase of the budget that is devoted to digital, that brings me back to Tuli on how to keep the balance of an increasing interest in digital components being part of basically any major public procurement, not only technology on its own, and between greening practices, right? More technology also means a sustainability challenge. So how to keep that balance?
I'd say that whenever it comes to procurements and when it comes to ICT-related procurements, there is a big part of fear that is involved in all that. And I think it's reasonable because it's not like buying pens or carrots where you can just, look at thing and taste it and understand if it's what you wanted or not. But all those procurements are about procuring innovation. And in this sense, innovation is very close to procuring art. So how can you, procure specifically something if you don't know what this something specifically is? I think that is the challenge with, ICT procurements, that we want to see something innovative, something new, but which would at the same time fit into our context, into our culture, into our environment that we already have. And I think that the TPIs can help in that, and all the private sector can help in how to make this situation better. If you think of the descriptions that we have for the building blocks, then I think these are a great starting point. What is not that clear yet is how should we use those descriptions. That should they be used as compulsory things, something that is a minimum that must be there, but is it something that gives you vision and you start moving towards that vision? And these are totally different approaches how we can use the same descriptions. What we have done with Estonian ICT cluster, how to help our procurers to do better, is that we basically wrote a book, how to procure ICT. And it's not saying that you should do this or you should do that. It just says, just make sure what is it that you need. And if you want to procure a team, then these are the things that are important. These are the roles that are available at the moment. Probably in 2 years, there might be different role names, but these are the roles, these are the qualifications that you probably would need. If you need a product, this is how you should, approach it. But really the best practice is that what works, what doesn't. It's up to the procurers if they use it, we hope they do, but it's for sure it's meant to help.
Certainly, I really like the example that you kindly share about supporting and collaborating public sector in even drafting. These are usually the roles that should support you in the implementation and delivery of a certain product or service, because you can be using open source, but you need expertise to implement certain capabilities. And that brings me back to TOR. And I think one of the biggest challenges is how to align different budget allocated in different agencies. Some agencies with a lot more budget, according to their leverage and their importance in the cabinet, and how the role of standardization and technical specifications come into play in helping leveraging the playfield for government entities to leverage ICT innovation.
Yeah. There was an architect that started the presentation with a statement once. He said that standardization are probably the most boring task we are dealing with, but probably the most important. To be able to communicate, we need protocols. We need to understand each other and so on. So standards, needless to say, it is a must-have. Going back to the budgets, one of the issues that we are really struggling with is that the cost for investment are taken somewhere else than the benefits are or the income are coming. So, for example, if we in public sector invest in a solution that the financial sector benefits from, largely it will benefits the environment, the owners of the banks, and so on. But the cost is shared by the taxpayers, and that's a really huge problem, which is not solved by standardization. But one. Is that we need the legislation or the requirement from central government to be stronger, to say that you must do, you have no choice. Because when you have a solution, when we have legislation which is weak, saying that You could use this common solution. You could use these DPI, these DPG products. But if you can argue for not doing it, it's okay from us. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. In this way, we need a much stronger central government saying that you must oblige to these processes, these standards. And coming back to my data sharing enthusiast, you must, when an external need for your data are coming up, you must open that data. We must avoid a situation where you say, no, it's difficult, it's costly, it's a risk. We need harder legislation on what to oblige to for governance purposes.
Agree, and I think having a very strong mandate and an institutional setup for a digital authority to be able to say, this is the digital services standard, this is the protocols that we're going to be using. It also facilitates to new players come into play as long as you follow up with the standards. And here you gave us the example of the CMS. It's not easy. It sounds very simple here, a central CMS, and everyone migrate their content, but it's an entire structure that needs to build around for that to happen. And it needs to be part of the regulatory framework and compliance mechanism. And it's an entire capacity building around everyone following the benefits of sharing the standards and technical specifications. And you started a very ambitious plan for a Smart Bangladesh 2041. And thinking on that time frame, how are you incorporating standard-based technical specifications and procurement practice in this collaborative planning process?
The Prime Minister of Bangladesh announced the concept of Digital Bangladesh in 2008. So there was a digital transformation process to take the whole of government approach. She just announced a Smart Bangladesh 2041 target, which is pegged with the country's ambition to become a high-income country. The Digital Bangladesh was pegged with the ambition of becoming a middle-income country, which we achieved. But the high-income country target is much, much loftier. And the target is 2041. And it's called Smart Bangladesh, which is a whole-of-society transformation using digital. It's much, much bigger. And procurement will actually play a very important role. Again, the e-procurement that I talked about, that will become smart procurement, and a lot of AI will be used for contractor management and also for the procurement process. Right now, its submission is electronic, award is electronic, but there's a lot of human interventions that make it slower and prone to potentially rent-seeking and corruption. So as we can introduce AI in more and more in the whole process, it'll make it much more efficient and much more of a level playing field. So that's what one of the smart procurement targets that we have. The second one is about a metric that we want to introduce. In the last decade or so, we used a metric called TCV, time, cost, and visit, to actually use that as a metric for procurement, reducing time, cost, and visit for citizens to change a manual service delivery to a digital service delivery. And we have delivered massive results using those three metrics. Just on the cost, we've saved citizens about $22 billion in the last decade. So what we want to do is to add a metric of environmental. So it'll become a TCVE for every procurement that we do. We actually have been using an ITU document. It's an old document where it talks about green procurement from 2012 and looks at a life cycle assessment approach. And we are trying to use that to see if we can bring that into a smart procurement approach as well, so that we can look at e-waste management, we can look at whole life cycle of procurement for electronic software and hardware. And the last thing is something that we are building called the Inclusive Digital Transformation Stack. It's a 5-layer stack. It's a DPI that will actually utilize a lot of the digital assets that we have developed over the last decade. And the 5 layers are ID, payments, data, services, and access mechanism. So they already exist in different incarnations, but it will become much more integrated as we develop the whole stack approach, the DX stack approach. So these are all going to be part of our smart procurement process, which will become much more environmentally friendly, greener, and much more efficient, and will bring a lot of innovations that are yet to come. Thank you.
Amazing, and very much looking forward to share those innovations with the GovStack community. The good news is that we updated the Green ICT Procurement Guidelines. We also have available an e-learning course in ITU Academy as part of the Green GovStack work stream. And I would like to quickly recap as we then move to the third panel. Flexibility, be able to change the engine without stopping the flight, really creating integrated, seamless experience for the citizens, and trust is on that. If we want citizens to trust the digital channels, designing services around user needs, user journeys in an open and collaborative way with the GovTech ecosystem is a key. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights, and thank you to the GovStack community that are present today. I give the floor now to Ibar for the next introduction in the third block of today's session. Thank you.